As the workers rushed to clear the storm damage, the millionaire cowboy suddenly raised his hand and said, "All stop now." His voice was calm, yet it carried a strange weight that silenced every hammer and engine. Dust floated in the air as everyone turned to see what had caught his attention. Beyond the broken fences and shattered wood, an old couple was struggling to rebuild their tiny house piece by piece. The man's hands shook, and the woman quietly wiped her tears while still trying to lift a heavy plank. The cowboy watched without moving, his jaw tight, his eyes reflecting something deeper than anger. No one understood why a powerful man like him would pause for two strangers. But in that still moment, a hidden memory began to rise inside him, one that he had buried for years and never wanted to face again until this very second. He was known across the valley as a powerful ranch owner who never wasted time or money, and people often whispered that his heart was as hard as the land he ruled. Workers followed his orders without question because he rarely showed hesitation or mercy. Yet behind that strong reputation, a quiet loneliness traveled with him wherever he went. He had built his empire through discipline and sacrifice, but success had slowly built invisible walls around his emotions. To the town, he looked like a man who valued profit over people and progress over pain. No one knew how many storms he had survived alone or how many memories he had locked deep inside his chest. That day, as he stood watching the damaged valley, something in his eyes hinted that his past was about to challenge the man everyone thought they understood until that silent, unexpected moment arrived suddenly. The storm had destroyed fences, barns, and small homes across the valley, leaving splintered wood, twisted metal, and puddles of mud everywhere. But while his crew moved quickly to repair his prized ranch, hauling timber and reinforcing walls with precise, practiced efficiency, the millionaire cowboy's eyes were drawn to a small, fragile house at the far edge of the property, barely standing, with shingles missing and beams bent, where an old couple worked silently, their movements slow and careful, their hands trembling as they lifted broken planks and patched holes with whatever scraps they could find. And for a long moment, he simply watched them, noticing how the man's shoulders shook with the weight of the storm's destruction and how the woman's hair clung damply to her face as she wiped sweat and tears, refusing to give in despite the ruin surrounding them. Each breath heavy, each step cautious, yet filled with a quiet determination that seemed almost impossible to meet. And he realized that while his land would be rebuilt by money, machines, and manpower, their home depended on hope, endurance, and sheer willpower, and an unexpected ache settled in his chest, unfamiliar and persistent, because the sight of their struggle reminded him of mornings he had spent alone in silence, of nights when he had faced losses and pain with no one to share the burden. And as he moved closer, his boots sinking slightly in the mud, he noticed the way they flinched when they heard him approaching, their eyes wide with suspicion and a faint trace of fear, as if the world had taught them that help never came without a price. And he felt an urgent pull to do something, yet paused, knowing that any sudden action could startle them or worse, break the fragile rhythm of courage they were clinging to. And he allowed himself a quiet, internal reckoning, observing the way the storm's debris had formed barriers around their fragile little haven and how the couple's hands were raw, their skin scratched and bruised, the lines of age and hardship etched deeply into every motion. And a wave of empathy surged through him, mingled with an unspoken recognition that these two people, so small against the vast fury of nature, possessed a strength far beyond what money could buy, far beyond what he had ever measured in his own life. And as the wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and splintered wood, he saw the man hesitate for a second too long, holding a warped beam above his head, and the woman tremble as she tried to steady a loose shutter. And without fully realizing it, the cowboy felt a tight knot in his throat, a mixture of admiration, sorrow, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility that he had not felt in years, a pull that was personal and urgent, compelling him to step forward not as a wealthy observer or detached benefactor, but as a human being who could no longer ignore the quiet courage of those who, despite loss and exhaustion, refused to surrender to despair. And for the first time in a long while, he understood that some battles were not about profit or prestige, that some victories were measured in survival, dignity, and the unbroken will of two people who had nothing but each other. And as he watched them lift, bend, patch, and hold, he felt an unfamiliar warmth rising, mingled with the realization that whatever he chose to do next would not only change the course of this storm-torn day, but could ripple through lives, reshape perspectives, and leave a mark far more lasting than any fence or barn he could rebuild with his own hands. And the air was thick with tension and possibility as he considered his next move. Every heartbeat loud in the quiet aftermath of chaos, the weight of choice pressing down like the storm clouds that still lingered above, waiting for the moment when the silence would break and something irreversible would begin. He watched them in silence for a long moment, the old couple moving slowly, yet with stubborn determination as the wind rattled the broken windows and the remnants of the storm swirled around their fragile home. And the crew behind him shifted uneasily, glancing at each other, unsure why their employer had halted the work on the ranch they had spent hours repairing. Their hammers paused mid-swing, their eyes flicking between him and the trembling figures at the edge of the property. And in that quiet that stretched almost unbearably, every sound, the creak of a leaning beam, the snap of a branch in the mud, the low whistle of the wind through shattered shingles, seemed amplified, filling the space with tension and expectation. And the cowboy's gaze remained locked on the couple, as if measuring something invisible, some unspoken scale of courage and suffering that only he could see. And he felt a tightening in his chest as he realized that his world of orders and control was powerless here, where the storm had stripped everything to raw vulnerability. And yet the couple persisted, hands raw, bodies bent, eyes focused on each other more than the work. And for a fleeting second, he saw a reflection of himself in their silent struggle, the loneliness, the small victories, the unacknowledged fears, and his own breath caught, not from the cold, but from the recognition that life's true tests often came in quiet, unnoticed forms that no amount of money could fix. And he felt a pull he had not felt in years, a mix of empathy and urgency that made him want to step forward but hesitate at the same time, knowing that any wrong move could shatter the delicate dignity they were clinging to. And the crew shifted again, whispering questions that died on their lips as they saw the hard line of his jaw, the intensity of his stare, the calm that carried an invisible weight. And in that suspended moment, time itself seemed to stretch, the world reduced to mud, splintered wood, and the fragile human determination at its edge. And he noticed the tiny details, the way the woman's fingers lingered on a cracked beam as if drawing strength from its weakness, the way the man's shoulders trembled but did not collapse, the way they exchanged a glance that was quiet yet brimming with unspoken resolve. And each small motion seemed monumental, heroic in its simplicity. And he felt a wave of emotion wash over him, raw and sudden, mingling sorrow, admiration, and an unarticulated need to act. Yet he held back, sensing that the moment demanded patience, that the world could wait, and that intervention, when timed with care, could transform not just their day but something far deeper. And as the wind tugged at his coat and the rain dripped from fractured eaves, the silence became almost unbearable, thick with anticipation, as if the very air were waiting for a decision, a gesture, a single act that would break the stillness and carry consequences far beyond the immediate. And he realized with sudden clarity that this pause, this watchful restraint, was itself a statement, a measure of respect for resilience, a recognition that some battles were fought quietly, without fanfare or applause, and that in witnessing courage without interference, he was preparing himself for a choice that would demand more than wealth, more than power, more than reputation. And the weight of that choice pressed on him, steady and unyielding, as the couple bent to their work, unaware of the storm within his mind and heart. And the world held its breath alongside him, waiting for the next move that could change everything. That he learned they had lost their children years ago, a grief so deep it had carved silent lines into their faces and settled in their eyes. Yet, despite the emptiness of their home and the quiet ache in their hearts, they had survived through sheer hard work and the fragile thread of hope that refused to break. And as the cowboy watched them struggle against the storm's aftermath, lifting warped boards and holding broken beams in place with hands calloused by decades of labor, he felt the weight of their resilience press against his chest. a mixture of admiration and sorrow that left him both moved and unsettled, and he realized that this tiny house, battered by wind and rain, was more than just wood and nails. It was a symbol of a lifetime of endurance, of two souls who had faced the worst and continued to rise without complaint or expectation, refusing to beg or plead even as the storm took what little shelter they had left, and every careful movement, every shared glance between the man and the woman, told a story of quiet courage and unspoken love that had carried them through years of loneliness and loss. And he felt an unfamiliar tightening in his throat as he imagined the nights they had spent listening to the wind howl outside, wondering if they would wake to another day, and the mornings they had greeted with aching muscles and hollow hearts yet refused to surrender to despair. And the realization hit him like a sudden gust of wind that no amount of money or influence could replicate this strength. No gesture of charity could truly honor it unless it was offered with the same humility and respect that life itself had demanded of them. And he noticed the way the woman paused, resting her hands on a broken post, her eyes distant yet steady, as if measuring how much more she could carry, and the man's lips pressed together in concentration, jaw tight. But his eyes flickered with warmth as he guided her movements. And the cowboy's chest tightened further as he understood that their pride and dignity were shields against a world that had taken too much from them, and that the storm, despite its fury, could not diminish the courage they carried inside. And in that instant he felt a surge of responsibility, a sense that witnessing their struggle was no longer enough, that inaction would be a betrayal of the very humanity he thought he had protected through wealth and power. And yet he hesitated, weighing the delicate balance between offering help and respecting their independence, knowing that any misstep could crush the fragile composure they maintained. And as he stood frozen in the muddy field, listening to the creaking boards, the drip of rainwater, and the faint sound of the couple's coordinated efforts, he realized that their story was not just about survival, but about unyielding spirit, and that this small moment, this storm-torn day, was a rare window into a life shaped by loss, perseverance, and an enduring hope that demanded recognition. And he felt a profound shift within himself, a tugging at old wounds and long-buried memories, a call to act that was as much about honoring their past as it was about shaping the moment to come. And he understood that whatever choice he made next would not just repair a house, but acknowledge the courage and dignity of two people who had faced the impossible and refused to surrender. And the quiet intensity of that realization held him still, suspended in time, as the couple bent to their work, unknowingly teaching him a lesson he would never forget. The cowboy's stern face softened as he realized their strength reminded him of his own lonely past, of nights spent staring at the dark ceilings of empty rooms, of mornings waking to silence heavier than any storm. And in that moment, the cold walls he had built around his heart began to crack ever so slightly, a warmth creeping in that he had not felt in years, a recognition that courage was not measured in wealth or influence, but in the quiet refusal to give up when the world seemed determined to break you. And without warning, he made a decision so sudden and bold that the workers froze mid-action, eyes wide as they watched him stride toward the couple with a calm authority that brooked no argument. And the old man turned, muscles tensed, ready for confrontation or reproach, while the woman instinctively stepped back, fear and suspicion mingling with the faint hope that perhaps, finally, help had arrived. Yet the cowboy did not speak at first, only observed, noting the mud caked on their boots, the splintered wood in their hands, the sweat and grime on their weathered faces. And then, in a voice steady and warm, he said something simple but transformative, words that carried more weight than any contract or offer he had ever made in his business dealings. And as he spoke, the couple's eyes widened, disbelief mingling with gratitude, their posture relaxing ever so slightly as they realized that the man before them, known across the valley for his wealth and power, had chosen to see them not as broken people in need of charity, but as humans worthy of respect and dignity. And the crew, still frozen in place, began to grasp the magnitude of what was happening, whispers passing along the line like a ripple through water, and the cowboy gestured for his workers to gather supplies, not for the repair of his own property, but for the fragile home that had withstood years of hardship and was now battered by the storm. And as men lifted boards, carried nails, and hoisted beams. The couple could hardly speak, hands trembling as they tried to continue their work, unsure if they were dreaming or awake. And the cowboy watched them with a quiet intensity, heart pounding, feeling a connection he had not allowed himself to acknowledge in years, a bond forged not by business or social expectation, but by shared understanding of struggle, resilience, and unspoken sorrow. And he realized that in choosing to help them, he was not diminishing himself, but discovering a new dimension of his humanity, one that had been hidden beneath pride, ambition, and isolation. And every action he took in that muddy, chaotic field was deliberate, respectful, and purposeful, honoring the dignity of two people who had endured the unimaginable and continued to rise. And as the sun broke through the storm clouds, casting a golden light over splintered wood and wet earth, the couple began to work with renewed hope, hands guided by the strength and generosity of a man who had recognized that true power lay not in wealth but in compassion. And in that moment, the valley seemed to hold its breath, witnessing the quiet miracle of human kindness reshaping lives, hearts, and futures in a way that no storm, no loss, and no obstacle could ever erase. And the cowboy stood silently, knowing that this choice, made in a heartbeat, would echo far beyond that single day, leaving a legacy not of money but of courage, empathy, and the transformative power of seeing the value in others when they needed it most. Instead of rebuilding only his ranch, he ordered his team to focus on the old couple's home first, and the workers, initially stunned, quickly moved with purpose, lifting beams, nailing boards, and patching roofs with care as if they understood the weight of what was happening. And the couple watched in awe, tears mixing with sweat, their hands trembling not from labor, but from the sudden, unexpected kindness that washed over them, a kindness that no storm, no loss, and no hardship had prepared them to receive. And the cowboy stood silently nearby, chest tight, eyes glistening, feeling a warmth he had long forgotten, realizing that true wealth was never in acres or gold, but in the courage to see another's struggle and choose to lift them up. And as the sun pierced the lingering clouds, shining on the rebuilt walls, hearts intertwined, a quiet truth settled in the valley. Lives can change, hope can rise, and a single act of compassion can echo forever, leaving an imprint on souls that no storm could ever erase.